Good evening, fellow Plexers. This goes out to an anonymous user in the Plexaholics group who Daniel, our mod, called my attention to. So, this anonymous user gets one video. Let me get rid of that. Um, while being able to be anonymous. I can't make multiple videos for someone I don't get introduced to. So basically, he or she was wondering if a old Mac Mini, I think it's from 2009 or so, would make a good Plex music server. And the interest is having it headless while being able to use a Windows machine to copy media from to the server as he rips it or acquires it or however that's going to happen. So what I've done is I've spun up a new container on my older Synology NAS, the DS1019 Plus NAS, and added a small music library to it. I have a few public domain artists that I normally showcase, but I added two of my favorite artists and I have another one to add. And I just want to suggest a Synology as an option for this person because it'll be long lasting. But it's not super cheap, but it is redundant storage. So the DS224 Plus is a good choice. It's a 2-bay NAS. It's $300, but it also has an Intel processor in it. It's a 9th gen Celeron processor that happens to have a still decent Intel iGPU embedded into it. It's the UHD Graphics 600 iGPU, which is in my Synology DS1520 5-bay NAS. It makes an admirable server, Plex server, and a music library doesn't need any of that hardware acceleration, so it kind of is a little perfect unit for a music server. 2 bays for two regular hard drives, and I would suggest either two Western Digital Red 4 terabyte drives for $100 each, or two Iron Wolf 4 terabyte NAS drives for $102 each. You can't go wrong with either of these. I am an Iron Wolf guy. I've bought 20 of them for all 20 bays that I have in my two 5-bay units that each have a 5-bay expansion unit connected to them. So I'm partial to these, but nothing wrong with these either. I don't believe in shucking hard drives. I think they're always a lower quality, even though they may be a brand name Western Digital or Seagate drive inside the container. Quality control processes tells me that they don't put the best drives into a portable. The best drives are reserved for the retail NAS channel. Drives that somehow test at lower quality, I'm sure they don't get destroyed. I'm sure they get put into those portable containers because they're not going to be running 24/7 and they probably perform admirably there. So don't take those back out and put them in a NAS. Use them as they're intended. Just my opinion. Well, Mr. Anonymous or Mrs. Anonymous, for full protection, you should buy an inexpensive, uninterruptible power supply. So they're stupidly easy to set up. You plug the NAS into the battery side. One of these is the battery side, and one is just the surge suppression side. And the battery side has the same surge suppression. You plug it in, there's a USB cable that plugs into this, that plugs into the back of your NAS. You go into the Synology software. This is Synology DSM 7.2.2 point something. And you go into the control panel and you go to hardware and power. You go to UPS and someplace. Well, you click UPS the second time. You enable USB support and you choose your UPS type, USB UPS. Click customize time and set 3 to 5 minutes and shut down the UPS when the system enters standby mode. This will give your NAS a controlled shutdown. You could buy a $200 UPS like I have on my bigger system, which has the expansion box plugged into it. I plug a bunch of network stuff in it, but I still have my NAS shut down within 3 minutes of power loss. Um, the bigger, badder the UPS is, the more battery runtime you have. And you don't really need battery runtime. If you set it for 5 minutes, by the time it goes through its shutdown process, it only needs to be on battery for 6.5 minutes or so. When power is restored, it boots back up. Now, if you just let the NAS have a cold shutoff like pulling the power, you risk data corruption. And that's what I want to show next. So you see all 10 of my bays between these two units. This is my backup NAS that I do have a test Plex server on to play with. Well, I'm running Synology Hybrid RAID 2, which is like RAID 6 but more flexible, and I can lose up to 2 drives without losing data. A lot of people won't span a volume or span one volume across 2 devices. I don't care, it's a backup. I've got my main media on my regular NAS, and this is a backup, so if this blows up, I still have my media. I can reconfigure this with larger drives and back it all up again. So anyway, this is just very easy to use. Synology is not difficult, and I do have a Docker container of Plex that's installed on this that I use for demos. I've shut that down to install the package version of Plex, which is just like any bare metal install on any other operating system. So this is running, and I can go to the web app here, and I'm already logged into this music server I've created, and here's my artist. So the next section of this video it has to do with prepping your music, which isn't just naming it. Naming it has very little to do with it. Naming it is for your own organization. It's the embedded tags that matter. So I want to show you how properly tagged or media with proper metadata scans. If I go into John Gorka, I see there's a description here. He's assigned a style. Some popular tracks are loaded, and then I see 14 albums, and then there's even a suggestion of a similar album. And if I click into an album, you see the album description. It's just all nice. The cover work or cover artwork comes through. So let's jump into Patty Larkin, another favorite artist of mine. Description, popular tracks, 9 studio albums, and Plex even knows that there's a live album, and it tells you that it's different from the regular albums. So this is interesting. There's not really a cover, and if I look into it, there's a description, and basically I see that this is more of a compilation with different artists, and if I scan down, here's an artist or an album cover, and this album is made up of multiple singers or multiple artists. John Gorka, Lucy Kaplansky, Eliza Gilkison, I haven't heard of her before, and it features some other artists. Dar Williams, I recognize that name. So the proper embedded metadata is very important, and that's what we're going to talk about next. Just in case a Synology 2-bay NAS is of interest to our anonymous poster to Plexaholics. So right now I have access to this Synology NAS, and if I start here, well, no, that's not where I want to be. Let me just go into the NAS fresh. So here's my main NAS. Here's this NAS. These are the shared media folders. The Plex package install created this shared folder that has all the application files in it. This is the Plex install. This is my media shared folder, and everything should be in one shared folder. This is a Docker shared folder for Docker containers. Here's my other Plex server installed that's not running now. And you can only run one version of Plex at a time on any single hardware platform. Here's just an empty shared folder. And here's the shared folder that has my backup from my main Synology NAS. So in the media folder, I have sort folders for every type of Plex music library except for the music library. This way I can have actual separate structure to have multiple movie libraries or multiple TV show libraries, like a main one, a kids one for cartoons, and an anime one for adult cartoons. Well, I shouldn't really say adult cartoons, but Japanese cartoons. But the music library, chances are you're not having multiple music libraries. You're just going to have one big one with all your artists in it. So this is not a sort folder. That's a library folder holding artist subfolders that hold album subfolders that hold the actual songs. This structure matters a lot less than the embedded metadata, which is what we're going to talk about next. I have on this computer this artist folder with these albums in it. So I'm going to start up Music Brains Picard, which is my favorite tool for Plex because it's available under Linux like I'm using, under Mac and Windows. And I'm simply going to drag, well, I can't drag anything in. Yes, I could. I could drag it into that pane. I dragged it in. Everything's in the left pane. None of it's categorized. So I'm going to click the unclustered files folder and then click clustered. And you'll see everything then sorts into the folder it belongs in. And if I open this folder up, you see the individual songs and you see the metadata they have. Just basic stuff. If I click on the album folder, now we'll see what's different, what values are different across each song and which ones are the same. So each song has the artist of the Papini Sisters. Each song has the album listed as Betcha Bottom Dollar. Each song has the date of 2007. And each song says there's 14 tracks and the genre is swing. And there's a few other things that are the same. So if I look at the individual song, then the metadata for the title comes in and the track number and the length and that kind of stuff. Well, what these don't have, none of these have embedded posters. So if I threw these into Plex, there's enough metadata for Plex to find a match to pull its own metadata. But if one of these albums was not in Plex's database or the database that Plex connects to, these might be added as an album because they've got enough basic information, but you won't see artwork because there's not embedded artwork. So this is more important for more obscure albums or your own compilations or even obscure compilation albums. It's definitely important for mixtapes that you've made yourself. You can take a bunch of different songs and get rid of their original album name and give it some made up mixtape name and throw in custom metadata, and Plex will scan that in as an album that hasn't matched to something officially and just build its listing based off the embedded metadata. So I'm just going to click on clusters and I'm going to, well, no, let me click on one album. We'll find better metadata for this. So I'll click on that and I'll click scan. Music Brains Picard reaches out to a database, and if it removes itself from the left side and adds itself to the right pane with a gold CD icon, it means we've got a good match. Let me expand this. If I click on the album, now you'll see what's the same across all the songs and what's different. So The title is still different. Um, this ISRC number is different. I don't know what that is. This Music Brains recording ID is different, but there's a lot that's the same. So if I've got the album highlighted, I can hit save, and you see how they all become a check mark. So now I can just click cluster over here and hit scan, and the rest are just going to scan automatically. So this will be the typical experience if you rip your own CDs, because usually most ripping software provides the right basic metadata, or it might ask you what the album is. So you've got a really good chance that Music Brains Picard is just going to match it up with the right album to then supply better metadata. Now I see we've got a few things going on here. So we're missing a song here. The Rise and Fall of Ruby Woo. We're missing Don't Sit Under the Apple Tree. So you see how this album, The High Life, has 27 out of 30 songs, and this one has 3 out of 14. Well, we can guess they're just two different versions of the same album. Maybe one's a UK or a Japanese release, and one's a US release. And some songs went to one release and some the other. But I'm looking for Don't Sit Under the Apple Tree. So this is complete, that's complete, and so's that. This has one song in it. And if I click on it, I see the original metadata. So that's not what we're looking for. All right, so let's just start at the top. Here's that song from below. And we can just drag this up here. So now that's complete. We don't have to worry about that. And if we close this, this now says 0 of 16. So I can right click and remove it. This all looks good. That all looks good too. So does that. Okay, so I'm going to click on each of these to make sure the original artist or the original song name is what it's supposed to be. All right, so those are all what they're supposed to be, and this is missing. All right, so this one, the yellow instead of green means it's suspect, but it's a match time-wise, and it's just got a better description than what the original value has. All right, so this changes belongs here. This Tennessee Waltz belongs here. And Hit the Road Jack belongs here. So we can get rid of this empty album. So we're still missing one song. Don't Sit Under the Apple Tree. Let's look in here. So that's The Rise and Fall of Ruby Woo. Okay, so this might be a little bit different. If I look, we've got Spooky, Walk Like an Egyptian, Old Cape Cod, Soho Nights, I Can't Believe I'm Not a Millionaire, I Don't Mean a Thing, I Don't Mean a Thing, Could It Be Magic, Jilted, Don't Sit Under the Apple Tree, is Crazy in Love here. And then we have It's Not Over, and She Sang. It's Not Over, and She Sang. We have All the Time in the World. Okay, so this album's listed 13 songs, and we have 12 in that one. So I suspect there might be two versions of this song. So I'm just going to click on it, and I'm going to just double click the title so it's editable. Control C to copy it. And let's search for a version that only has 12 songs. All right, so here we are. The US version has 12 songs. Music Brain's Picard tried to match it to the Great Britain one that had 13 songs. So we'll just double click that. All right, we see that added. So we'll close this down, we'll click, and we'll drag everything into the correct one. So now this 13 we can get rid of, and we'll open up this correct one, and we've got a good match. So there's some manual work to do with Music Brain's Picard, and I have different Music Brain's Picard videos. So now I'm just going to select all of them and hit save. I'll hit delete to remove them from Music Brain's Picard, and let's drag the artist folder in again. And because they all have robust metadata from Music Brain's Picard just automatically matches them up. So if you drag any album in and it moves from the left column to the right column with a gold symbol, it probably has all the best metadata, but check it. Check a couple songs, see if it's got less metadata on the original side versus the new value, and then save it. So this is Music Brain's Picard. So I can close it, and let's copy this to the NAS. Let's pull up the Plex server. All right, let's wait for this to be finished. Okay, let's scan this for new music. Now, the one downfall about a Linux Plex server has to do with a music library. Okay, so I added the album, the artist folder, the Pupini sisters, if I can say it. We've got a description for them. We've got a style, popular tracks. We have 5 out of the 6 albums added as regular albums, and 1 is a compilation album. So with the right embedded metadata, you can't miss. And I have other Music Brain's Picard if you want to put in custom mixtape type albums. If you come across albums that aren't in the database, as long as it has enough key matching metadata across all the songs and embedded artwork, and you can fix all of that with Music Brain's Picard, it'll scan in and you won't really know the difference between a properly matched album and a one that's scanned in with enough metadata, besides maybe going, now let's just go into Gorka and pick an album. Well, maybe this didn't match up. There's no description for this album. Let's pick another one. So see how we have the description? Something that doesn't match fully won't have a description, but that doesn't mean you can't edit in your own description under the Review tab. Now you have something here. So this is almost 25 minutes long. To our anonymous user, this is what you could have with a Synology NAS. There's lots of help out there. If you go this route, make Will at his Space Rex channel someone you follow. He'll teach you how to set up a Synology NAS as a new owner. to be fully protected, and I can help you with the Plex stuff. Now again, there's other options. You could create your own Unraid server on any old computer hardware laying around, and let me open up my regular production Unraid setup. This is running on a 14th gen Asus NUC with an 14th gen N5 or i5 Intel processor in it. I have these Docker containers running. I also run channels DVR alongside Plex server. There's no media on this system. My media is on my newer Synology NAS, and this is a share I've mounted. Everything under Unraid, even though it's a Linux operating system, everything is done through the GUI. There's nothing you have to do to set up with a terminal like you do under a Linux desktop for anything advanced. It's just stupidly easy to use. But to use up to 6 hard drives, it costs $69 to buy. There is a free month trial, and then each year there's a renewal to be able to keep getting updates. I think it's $35. If you're going to have more than 6 drives, it's another bump in price. Then you cross another certain level of drives, it's even more expensive. And I think the lifetime license is a couple $100. So that sounds expensive, but just for a small music server, it's really not expensive, and it's stupidly easy to use. I have a test Unraid server. It's on my old NUC, so there's not room to have redundant storage devices for the Docker containers or for the media. But if you had like a 8th or 9th gen HP ProDesk system that I suggested in the post, well, it's got an NVMe slot for the cache drive to run your Docker containers on, and it's got 3 SATA ports you could use for data drives, or even 1 SATA SSD and 1 NVMe SSD to have the redundant cache pool like I have on my production Unraid system. And that still leaves 2 SATA ports for 2 4 terabyte drives, 1 for your media and 1 as what Unraid calls the parity drive, which protects your data if your data drive dies. And of course, if the parity drive dies, you just put another equal size drive in and make that the new parity drive to secure your data on your regular drive. So I know this is all Greek to you, but Unraid is stupidly easy to set up, and I've got some playlists on what I did with Unraid over here, and how to set up a simple Plex server, which is what this is an example of. Okay, Mr. Anonymous, you don't have to introduce yourself in the group, but for further help with me by further tutorials, you do have to introduce yourself. I like to know who I'm helping. I like to know how you advance if I help you in the future. And if you stay hidden behind the scenes, you're like a brand new person each time I talk to you, because you may not be you. So I hope you can understand that. The group fully supports you posting anonymously. But how will I know it's you if you post again? And I'm just not likely to make a second video for an anonymous person. And I help a lot of people out who contact me through different Plex groups, through my YouTube channel, and sometimes even on Reddit. And sometimes I'll make a new video to help someone who simply asked a question on my YouTube channel. I'm not a YouTube star. Subscribe if you like my content, but I'm not in it for the maximum number of subscribers. I definitely don't prep anything. This was a cold video, and I'm just trying to get information out to you, and I gotta shut up because we're hitting 30 minutes. I'll get this on YouTube and into the thread before I go to bed. Said the poet who doesn't know he's a poet. Happy Plexing.